I'm never going to call it the Joe Rogan Experience again. Ever. It is the Joe Rogan effect.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because, man, when you get on Rogan.
Yeah.
And it was different for me as a musical artist because I was telling Joe this. I got to see the tangible of it because he's on Spotify. It's the only way to hear Joe. Right? So, like, we got to see data of, like, how many people went straight from podcast to a listener. Like how the correlation was on that platform from immediate. Because you got to think, as a music artist, Joe Rogan's the cheat code.
Yeah.
And I didn't think about it neither. I just knew he was the biggest podcast on earth. But more than anything, I knew I was a fucking huge fan. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I knew. You know what I mean? I'm a fucking huge fan. This is fucking Oprah. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is in the 90s. He's Oprah.
Was it nerve-wracking?
Not because Joe don't make it that way. You've met Joe.
Yeah.
Joe makes you feel like you grew up next to him in Boston.
Yeah, he goes out of his way to make you comfortable. You know what I mean?
And he's just so like, Joe doesn't give a about anything.
Yeah.
And like, not that, like, meaning like nothing bothers Joe. He gives a about everything. He's the most caring dude ever. Mm-hmm. But like, he's just unbothered, dude. You feel that on him. He's like, hey, man, come have a seat, dude. We're just going to chat, man. You know what I mean? It's like fucking, he makes you feel like there's not a camera rolling.
But is it strange for you being such a fan? Like, you listened to Joe for a long time.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you get a call to then go be there.
Yeah.
Be with him.
For sure.
Was it like, were you like a little nervous? Were you like, Super. Oh, it should be this way? Like, were you like, did you think about it a lot? Or were you just like, oh, I'm just going to go catch a vibe? Well,
I had heard I was lucky enough that by that time, me and Theo are close. Me and Shab are good friends. I love Shab to death. Mm-hmm. Me and Schultz are super close. Like, I'd already developed these friendships of people that were his friend that were already me and Brad already done Bert's pod a couple times. Like, I'd already had this kinship where everybody was like, you got to meet Joe. People started hitting me with the like, yo, we got to get you with Joe.
Oh, you never met him before?
No, I'd never met him. So I knew Joe knew who I was. Because when I first met Joe, he was like, I walked through the green room, beside the green room, and I thought he was having a conversation, so I just tried to get through, and he was like, yo, what's up, fucker? You know, or whatever Joe does, and he gives me a big hug, and we squeeze, and I'm like, man, I love you. Joe's like, I love you too, man. He was like, man, listen, whatever you want tonight, it's just, I want you to have the night of your life. I was like, thank you, and they just start feeding us tequila, and I go back into the, you know what I mean? It was, I go back in the green room and met Ron White and hung out because I think Derek was there. So Derek and David Lucas, the homies from the comedy club in Nashville, because, you know, I'm a regular at Zane. He's like a fucking nerd, and I just barge in the green room on everybody. But lucky for me, they're my friends, and they were like, come on, you got to come back here and meet Ron. You got to come hang out with Tony and, you know, whatever. It was just like that kind of a night, you know what I mean? And the next day, Joe hit me himself on Instagram, was like, we should do the pod. Yeah, it was one of the greatest calls I ever got. I'd never been more excited. So, and I told him this, man, for like, my wife started making me doing vision boards in January of 2017. So every January, we get together and we put like a dream board. You know what I mean? She does like the vision boards where she cuts stuff out of magazines and you can see it. And it comes true for her. It's crazy. I just did like 1 through 10. Like, these are the 10 things I want to achieve. You know what I mean? And every year, the number one was Joe Rogan Experience. You know what I mean? Because I thought that, you know, like, I learned this from listening to him too, is that just like seek things you're a fan of and then enjoy them, and then maybe you can find a way to monetize them. Like, his approach to everything is like, I just go do it because I like to do it. I talk to people I like to talk to.
UFC becomes the biggest thing in the world. I like to talk to people. It becomes the biggest show in the world. Yeah, it's like, that's it. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, just chase the passion. So I was like, I liked Joe. So in my mind, a bunch of people like me like Joe. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I just got to get to, you know, like, you know, does that make sense? Like, the math was so easy for me, you know, like, that's all how I ever thought about it. The universe giving you an alley-oop.
Yeah, for sure. It's what I needed. And it was the week of the album. I ended up going out there the week of my album. You know, got me the big Spotify bump. It was a huge moment for me, man. It was just so like, cool. Dude, it's crazy. I had it with Flagrant again. Like, I got such a bump from Flagrant.
Really?
Yeah. There's certain things you do that you see like a bump. Yeah. Like, you feel it. Like, you realize
the Richter scale kind of bounces.
Yeah, and you recognize there's a new audience in the comments all of a sudden. You're like, oh, I've found new people. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, new people have found me. You know? I've seen that obviously the most with Joe. I felt it with every time I've done a comedian podcast. Though. There's people out there that there's a guy, you know, there's like anti-culture for every other culture that I've been labeled he's just a musician that built his brand on comedian podcast. But what they don't know about me that I'd like to clear up while me and you are talking as friends It's because I only choose to do comedian podcasts. I don't do that other shit. You know what I'm saying? I like respectfully, I just fucking don't do it.
Yeah.
I don't go to it. They call. It's not for lack of a desire. It's just me being like, just fucking, I don't know.
Yeah.
What are we going to talk? There's only so many times we could talk about a fucking G chord and how to write a song. You know what I mean? Before I'm going to lose my fucking mind in here.
Yeah.
You know, give me somebody that fucking, is fucking, give me a homie. And by default, go back to what you love. When I have a night off, I go to the comedy club. So by default, I have a lot of friends that are comedians.
Yeah.
Other musicians don't do podcasts. So it's always a motherfucker that's not a musician that's critiquing it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean?